Sunday, 6 o'clock, we host a little old show. It's called Dangerous Thoughts, where I rock the mic and Tyson talks the talk. We say what we want. It might give you a shock, but it's not shock radio. It's more than that. It's about people thinking and talking right back. We keep the mic open, everyone reports. We got different opinions on the floor. It's called Dangerous Thoughts, Sundays at 6 p.m. The subscript pirate might let you win to express your mind and get it off your chest. It's called Dangerous Thoughts. Tune in Sundays at 6. Sundays at 6. Tune in to Dangerous Thoughts every Sundays at 6. Tune in to Dangerous Thoughts every Sundays at 6.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the first live edition of Dangerous Thoughts with Manu and Tyson and our producer, Subscript Pirate, who you can see down below. He's the little mini-me. He's me and Tyson's little mini-me down below. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. This is the first time that we've had a live show that we're showing our faces, our beautiful faces. That's Tyson's beautiful face over there. That would be Manu's beautiful face. That's me and that's Manu and Tyson waving at each other, loving each other. Thank you. So this is our first live show. We're on Twitter we're on Twitter, YouTube, my Facebook profile, and my Facebook page at Manu and Reme. You can watch us at all those places, and you can also watch at Subscript Pirate on Twitter as well. Hopefully we'll be out to Instagram and other places, but if you've never tuned into Dangerous Thoughts before, here's the basis of the show. Basically, we pick a topic every single week, and we talk about something that we believe the nation and the public and our species and humanity needs to talk about in general that may be uncomfortable, that may be a little bit hard to talk about, or a little bit emotional, or a little bit there's a C word I'm looking for, Tyson. This is my co-host, Tyson Strasberg, by the way. What's the C word I'm looking for? Controversial.
There we go. I was going with a whole nother C word. Good thing we didn't use that on our first live show.
We also do very often get caught up in talking about penises, but you'll find that if you become a regular listener. Somehow always the show devolves into penises, but we'll try to keep it on point this week. Already on point.
So, Manu, we have our first comment, and I'm going to put it up at the bottom of the screen.
Oh,
it's
cool.
from Facebook. D. McGee says, "Thank you for streaming this on Facebook."
Hey, D, you're welcome. It's exciting for us to get out on the other social media platforms. In fact, as soon as I get my damn Instagram back, we'll be on my Instagram. And as soon as the show gets great and we work out all the bugs and we're doing a show we're proud of, it'll be on my LinkedIn as well, and probably on a show called At Dangerous Thoughts Show on YouTube. But welcome. Thank you for joining us. Just so you know, for this particular show, I have an echo in my microphone. So if I sound a little high, if I sound a little slurred, it's because I'm hearing myself a second or so later than when I'm speaking, and it really messes with your head. So I'm not having a stroke. I'm not high. I'm just having headphone problems. The topic of this week is the criminal justice system in America, and I think we're probably going to discuss a little bit about Pride and a little bit about UAPs and this interesting UAP incident in Las Vegas. In fact, let's start with that, because I think, Tyson, you told me about this, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And I'm the coast in me is trying to tie all these together. So I'm thinking that it was a gay alien that landed, and he was arrested, right? So justice
Yeah.
system, UAP, right?
Yeah.
But
Was he
then
arrested? Did they get him?
they didn't get him. No. So as the story goes, and I'm just recounting this from memory. A few days back, there was a bright flash in the sky in Las Vegas. Lots of people saw it. A 911 call came into the police saying that wherever that flash landed, that 10 feet tall creatures that were not human were outside this home, and they called the police. Now, on a police's body cam, you can see this flash coming down, and lots of people call it in. When they got to the residence, they didn't find any creatures. And they later said that, well, it might have been unwarranted. We don't know how trustworthy, the source that called this in was. But in any event, I mean, what wasn't what wasn't disputed is something flew through the sky, and lots of people saw it.
Yeah.
So
And did they report where it landed?
I don't know. I don't know if there was. See, if it was a meteor, which it could have been,
Mhm.
it would have likely burned up, and there would have been no crater. I don't believe when they went to the house they found anything that looked like landing strut marks in the ground or anything like that. So it was just supposedly the person who called it in. It was their word against. You know, well, do we believe you?
Yeah. Their word against, do we believe them?
Right.
I I hope. I mean, I hope there's 10-foot tall aliens running around or running to their escape ship that they had somewhere else in Vegas in case they crashed. I just find it interesting that it was just a few days ago that the DoD or the Pentagon asked people to keep an extra eye out for UAPs and to report them. And then, not like 3 days later, this thing falls out of the sky in Vegas. Sort of an interesting coinkydink. Call that a coinkydink. If we're being invaded, this could be our final show. There could be 10-foot tall aliens breaking in, stealing Tyson's piano and my spaceship, and Cassie's bong.
Where's I see you down there.
There's no bong in the screen.
Speaking of criminal justice, all right. So I was a pot warrior in my lifetime. My dad was a pot warrior. I was a big pot smoker when I was younger. Um, and our producer's a big pot smoker now. And to not be joking at all, truthfully, in the 80s when I grew up, me and my family went through a lot of trauma and hell and DEA and SWAT officers breaking into our homes in Idaho and taking our property from us, which is actually something in the Constitution that they're not supposed to be able to do in the Bill of Rights. It's just called double jeopardy. They're not supposed to be able to take your house and your property and throw you in jail. But they did that to my father when I was 8 years old. They came up through the trees. They kicked in the doors with their M15s and their guns drawn, and they beat up my dad pretty good and scared the crap out of me because I was 8 years old hiding in my closet. And an officer who I remember his name, it was Officer Van Cleve, came around the closet door and actually pointed his revolver at my 8-year-old face. So my experience went from being a rich kid in Idaho to a rich, privileged kid in Idaho to being suddenly on the street, dad's in jail. And unfortunately, things like that are still happening to people all the time in states where marijuana isn't legal. So we've got this interesting situation where we've got like 30 states or 40 states. I don't know how many it is. Maybe someone can look that up. But definitely the majority of the states have decriminalized marijuana, if not legalized it entirely. but we're still dealing with American citizens getting caught up in the system. In fact, the first time that we legalized marijuana, it was in California, and I was like 20 years old, and I was working on it. Actually, it was like 19. And as soon as we legalized it, I was dumb. I was a kid, and I thought, oh, great, it's legal now. We can do whatever we want. And I ended up giving an undercover officer, a small piece of marijuana that I just offered him because he came up to my booth. I used to collect signatures for trying to legalize Prop 215 at my hemp booth, and I used to teach people about hemp and its qualities and how it was made legal, etc. And I almost got caught up in the system because I was 2 weeks later, they kicked in my door at 5:30 in the morning, and I tried to go out my window, but when I went out my window, there was another officer there with a gun, prepared for that. And they pulled me out of my bed and my roommate out of his bed, and they pulled me out of my bed by my feet so that I crashed down on the floor. They zip tied my hands to my legs. I think they call that hog tying. And it was very ugly. Even when pot was legal, I got charged, and this was only like 2 weeks after we changed the law, which is one of the things you'll find when we change laws that are unfair or not right. It takes a little while for the police department and the criminal justice system to define the law and catch up with what the people actually voted on and define the law, the words of the law. In courts, it takes a lot of people getting busted to actually define what the law actually means. So I've completely forgot my point telling all these stories, but the criminal justice system in America. Okay, that was the point. I've dealt with the butt end of the criminal justice system, the part, some of the bad part, I was lucky not to get taken away from my parents. I also was lucky when I was 18 because when they kicked in my doors, all they found was dirty pipes and rolling papers and like a dirty bong. And I was like, congratulations, you found the kingpin. It's a dirty pipe. But they still charged me with marijuana sales. And I was so scared. If I knew then what I know now, I would have fought the case. But I was so scared sitting in Los Angeles County Jail dealing with the craziness of the prison system as a young 18-year-old pretty white boy in LA County that I was just so scared. I was ready to get out of there if they'd let me out. So I pled guilty to sales, which is a felony. And then 2 years later, same place, I was on the beach at the hemp booth. My dad had come to visit. My dad was like, let's celebrate. You've been doing such a good job, and marijuana's legal now, and there's medicinal places open. Let's go out on the beach and smoke a joint. So we did, and the beach police rolled up, and they arrested my father. They took all his pot, and he had some hash, and they let me go. And I always think back to that time. It was, long story short, it was pretty incredible because my dad got his pot back and got it all returned and was charged for nothing. And we brought cameras down to the courthouse and while he got his pot back to film him getting his pot back. So I was proud of him. But if that cop would have not let me go that day, it's possible that I could have got caught up in the system with 2 felonies or with at least another charge of smoking in public, which would have been a probation violation. And, I could be one of those guys that got a couple unlucky pot charges that led to a long prison term, which is happening to kids still, because and people, because you'll think you have legal marijuana in California or Colorado or wherever, and you'll take a road trip, and maybe you'll go through a couple of states where it's illegal, and you'll get pulled over there, um, and then people are still dealing with these, hardcore 10 to 15 year to 25 year to life bullshit sentencing guidelines for marijuana. Um, so I've seen that ugly side of the system. And on this show, I wanted to talk a little bit about our rights as Americans and the Bill of Rights in general, because I don't think enough people know what their rights are. Um, I might be a little bit of a boring first show if I read the entire Bill of Rights, but we could talk about. I thought maybe we could talk about the Bill of Rights, and we could start with like the First Amendment and talk about what it means, and see if me or Tyson can come up with some examples of where it's been abused.
And the first
Tom Ziegler knew.
that wasn't me.
Yeah, it's me.
The first 10 amendments to the Constitution of the United States is what is popularly known as the Bill of Rights. And through the time since each of these amendments have been adopted, to
Our
the
producer's
Constitution,
taking a bong rip. The
it,
tobacco
it
water
has been
pipe.
it has been interpreted and reinterpreted, right? What does the Second Amendment mean? And do they, if they knew the weapons we had now, would they have written it slightly differently? And First Amendment, and Fifth Amendment, and on. So it continues to go before the Supreme Court. They continue to, using today's lens, look at that. But something you said a moment ago, Manu, about jurisdiction, and take marijuana for example. Yes, it's legal in Colorado, it's legal in California, but those are state laws. It is still illegal federally. That means I work for the U.S. Coast Guard at the federal agency. If they catch you with pot, they can charge you, even though, because they're not a state agency, they're a federal agency. Same thing with Border Patrol, same thing with TSA, same thing with Border Patrol.
Forest Police, National Forest.
Yeah, CIA, FBI, ATF, I could go on. But any of those federal agencies enforce federal law, and it's still federally illegal. But state police, like California Highway Patrol, wouldn't enforce it. City police and county sheriffs wouldn't enforce it. But a federal agency might. They usually won't. But if they want you for something else, or if they need something to use as leverage to press you to testify about something else, and they can use that. Well,
I'll tell you something crazy. We had a rainbow gathering in Oregon, and a rainbow gathering is basically like 50,000 hippies and road kids and people that are living on the road, and hippie types and punk rock types, gutter punks, etc. All meet in the National Forest every year in July for about a month, but it's actually technically the 1st to the 7th. First of all, they never file. God, sorry, this echo. They never file a permit to have the rainbow gathering, because I think, is that Article 1 of no, that's freedom of expression, right to bear arms. One of these early amendments says that you have the right to peacefully gather. I think it's 1. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise of thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people to peacefully assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. That's Amendment 1. So the hippies always, at this rainbow gathering, always have the Forest Service try to get them on a legal gathering. And they've fought to keep the Rainbow Gathering open for like 50 years now. Every time the Rainbow family wins, somebody takes the charge. There's no leaders of the Rainbow family. It's a completely democratic organization, run somewhat like the Native Americans ran their things. At the end of the Rainbow Gathering, everybody goes to a tent. You want to vote on where the gathering is going to be next year. You pass a feather around. It's very traditional Native American style. But every time the gathering happens, the federal government tries to stop it, and the Rainbow family always wins because of Amendment 1, the freedom that includes the freedom to peacefully assemble. You shouldn't have to file a permit to peacefully assemble. And they always win that. But the crazy thing was the gathering was in Oregon. So everybody that went there thought that Oregon was a legal pot state. And so everybody was like, yeah, the gathering's in Oregon. We're going to bring all our weed. We're going to have a lot of fun. But as soon as we got on the federal land, no longer legal. So the National Forest Service and the sheriffs, I guess the officers of the Forest Service, had a bunch of fun in Oregon, jailing a bunch of people for marijuana on federal land. And it's a shame because you'd think when we finally get to a point where the great majority of states and people believe that a prohibition type law that is not harming people, you'd think it's like at a certain point the federal law should have to change, but I guess that's not in the Constitution. When does the federal law, how do we press to get the federal law changed if 30 states or 35 states or more have ratified, like a legal marijuana law? How do you change
Right.
federal law?
Federal law doesn't require an amendment to the Constitution. Federal law is written by Congress, which is the House and the Senate. They make law. The judiciary interprets that law. And so laws, somebody in the House submits a bill. It's taken up, it's voted on. If it's passed, it's sent to the Senate where it's ratified or modified and sent back to the House. Then it's sent to the president. The president signs it, it becomes law. And so lots of federal laws get signed every single year. And things do change. How do we, the public, bring about that change? It's about voting. It's about making sure you know who the candidates are, that you're voting for people who represent what you represent. And look what happened with Roe v. Wade. We elected enough people, and it got taken away. It just got, and people say, well, that was the Supreme Court. But who elects the Supreme Court? The president. Who elects the president? We do. So it really comes down to voting. It comes down to making sure you understand the candidates, what they stand for. And when they get elected and they start passing these laws, we put them there to pass exactly what they said they were going to do when we voted them into office. So we need to be very careful when we go to vote and understand the issues, because that's where the laws come from. And the president's appointed judiciary that interprets those laws, right?
So the Ninth Amendment, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. I'm just going to read this little blurb here because you brought up Roe v. Wade, and I think it's an interesting topic. The Ninth Amendment declares that there are additional fundamental rights that exist outside the Constitution. The rights enumerated in the Constitution are not an explicit and exhaustive list of individual rights. It was rarely mentioned in Supreme Court decisions before the second half of the 20th century, when it was cited by several justices in Griswold versus Connecticut. The court in that case voted a statute prohibiting use of contraceptives as an infringement of the right of marital this microphone, I mean the headphones, this is interesting. The court in that case voted a statute prohibiting the use of contraceptives as an infringement of the right of marital privacy. This right was in turn the foundation upon which the Supreme Court built decisions in several landmark cases, including Roe versus Wade, which overturned a Texas law making it a crime to assist a woman to get an abortion. And now we're back to, several states being able to prohibit abortion again. I think that's also an interesting. Sorry, I had to turn the volume down so I could speak. This won't be a problem next week. Now, so they call these rights that are supposedly our unalienable rights. They get, there's a word they use for when, oh man, when they become like part of federal law, or when they get ratified. I looked this up earlier too.
Well, when a law gets enacted, it is it's signed by the president. After it did that process. But to create an amendment to the Constitution, you've probably heard that Gavin Newsom introduced the 28th potential amendment, and it is around gun restriction. I'm not going to get into it because I know that there's a lot of emotion behind that. But basically, it's saying we need to have basic some basic level of gun control at this point. Whether there's a background check in your state or not. Some states have background checks, some don't. Some have a waiting period if you buy a gun, some don't. There's all the states control that, right? The 28th Amendment would say, look, in all 50 states, if you want to buy a gun, there needs to be a background check. If you want to buy a gun, there needs to be a minimum waiting period of 48 hours or whatever that is. And again, I'm neither pro nor anti. I'm just saying that's what Gavin Newsom has proposed. What would have to happen for it to be a constitutional amendment is 2/3 of the United States, 2/3 of the states would have to ratify, would have to vote for it. Considering that more than half the states are red states, I don't see it happening. It's something that he can say, look, I tried, but I don't think it's going to go anywhere.
I'm a fan of the Constitution in general and the Bill of Rights in general. I believe that all of them still stand the test of time. And I believe that people do have the right to bear arms. And if you want to be a part of the 3%ers that actually join your state militia and go out and practice and go to the target range and et cetera, I think you should be able to do that. And I think that people should always be able to bear arms, firearms for their own protection. And for the day that, the American government steps over the line 1 foot too far. But I hear your logic. I mean, there are certain people, violent criminals, for example, mentally ill people that could have a schizophrenic break or could harm others because of a mental illness. There are certain logical reasons to stop people from having the right to own a gun. And it's sort of a shame that we as a people can't come up with a very simple and short list of, gun control that makes sense.
And I agree. I've used, for example, epilepsy, right? If you have epilepsy and you have uncontrollable epileptic seizures, odds are you're not going to be able to get a driver's license. It's not a punishment. You have not committed a crime because you have an illness you can't control. But you're also not given a driver's license because you could, not the least of which, hurt your own self. You could be driving, in the middle of the night on an empty road, and have a seizure and crash and kill yourself. You could hurt a member of the public. You could have a seizure and crash your car into another car or pedestrian. So it's not to punish those people. They've done nothing wrong. It's just if you're an epileptic, probably shouldn't drive a car. And I think the same thing, if you have paranoid schizophrenia or some kind of, they say 1 in 3 people have some form of mental health issue. I
Heavy
don't think
borderline
you're right. I don't
personality
think they all
disorder.
qualify. I don't think they all qualify. I'm just saying the most extreme of those, like those paranoid you've shown violent tendencies, or if you're a criminal who has been convicted of gun violation, like if you robbed a 7-Eleven and then you spent 5 years in jail, then you robbed a bank, you spent 10 years in jail, then you robbed another bank. At what point do we say
No more guns
probably
for you.
shouldn't? Yeah, when do we say, okay, you don't get a gun this time?
I think even if you commit a violent crime without a gun, you hack somebody up with a machete, or you get in a knife fight. Um, there should be a period of time and tests and certain things that you should have to do, classes that you should have to take, etc.
And
To get in any
we have a roadmap,
violent
right?
altercations. Yeah.
We have a roadmap for that with driver's license. What happens if you get a DUI? Your first DUI. You don't lose your right to drive for the whole rest of your life. Your
No.
license will be suspended for a while. You will have fines. You will have, and then if you continue that behavior, then you could potentially lose your license forever. And maybe it's that way, with gun laws. What kid doesn't get in a fight at school? I don't think that means you'll never be able to own a gun your whole life. And people have marital problems, and sometimes people get physical. And maybe there needs to be a cooling off period or something. But we have such things with driver's license right now. Like you can get it taken away permanently or temporarily suspended based on the level of egregious behavior, and maybe that's a roadmap for guns. I don't know.
No, I think that sounds good. Um, I think that's an excellent roadmap for, uh, I also think just people in general, even if you've committed no crimes, you should have to pass some kind of psychological test.
I don't know about a psychological. I definitely think you would, at very least, you need to pass, just like with a car before you get a license. You need to sit behind the wheel and show that you know how to drive this motor vehicle. It's dangerous; it could kill people. Um, Same thing, kind of with a gun.
Yeah,
Like
show that you know how to
you
use your gun
right.
properly.
I know how
Yeah.
to use. I know how to clean it properly. I know how to load it properly. I know how to handle it properly. Um, More people, there are more accidental shootings than intentional shootings in the U.S. People
Yeah.
who mishandle a gun, or a kid that got a hold of a gun, or you were cleaning the gun and pulled the trigger. So many accidental uh, gun injuries, and it's because at a certain age, if you're 21, you could walk into any gun store, barring the fact that you have no mental health issues or no criminal background. You can walk in, buy a gun, know nothing about guns, never touched one in your whole life, and depending on the state, there might not even be a background check, and you can walk out the same day. In California, there's a background check. You have to wait either 7 or 14 days. I'm not sure, but in any event,
Yeah, it was a week or two. I don't remember.
but you get your gun, even though you don't know how to use it. You get your gun,
Which
and
is lame. I once bought a shotgun, and I had no idea how to clean it, how to replace the spring, even how to load it properly. I figured it out. I watched YouTube videos. But like these are like classes that should be offered at the gun store. There should be a range there. You should be able to show that you know how to safely use your weapon, safely store your weapon, that you know the laws about your weapon, etc. Seems like simple stuff that all people should be agreed to. Besides, I should just be able to buy whatever damn gun I want, whenever I want, however I want.
80% of gun owners agree with that,
Really?
including Republicans and Democrats, agree that there should be some very, very basic, right? At least a federal background check. At least,
Mhm.
maybe a 2-day waiting period. I mean, if somebody runs into a gun store and says, "No, no, 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 I can't wait 2 days. I need it now. I need it right now." Probably
I
don't
gotta
need it
go
right
deer
now.
hunting.
Yeah,
I really gotta go right now.
that's kind of a tip that maybe you don't need it right now. And that's the reason for a waiting period. It's not just so you can conduct a thorough background check and make sure, but it's also kind of a cooling down period because you don't want somebody to go out and buy a gun in anger, and after a week or so, maybe they've whatever is making them want to go buy the gun. If it is, say, out of anger, there's a cooling down period. Um, again, I'm not an expert in this, and I don't claim to be, and I'm really not trying to endorse one side or the other. Just trying to
You're
have some
such a
thought here.
careful co-host. I have no uh, sides. I'm not picking sides. I have no
I kiss
opinions on the issue,
everybody's
left or
ass. I
right.
don't care what color it is. I,
Yeah. I do want to talk about, I think, the Third Amendment. Is that the one? No, I think the third one is the one is it the third or
no
fourth?
soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without consent of the owner, nor and a lot of that, if you look back at, well, we've seen this in World War II, where Jews were displaced, and the Nazi soldiers kind of tossed them out of their house. I'm the new owner of your home. Um, by the way, some of this even going on to this day in uh, Palestine and Gaza. So it's really quite
Uh, maybe choose the right. All right, I'm just gonna go away from the Bill of Rights for a second, and just talk about the criminal justice system in general that we have, and some abuses of its power that I've seen in the few experiences in the criminal courts that I've been able to view. Um, there was one day that I was going into court for it was traffic, something. No, it was my case coming up. But first, they did a bunch of prisoners that they had in the LA County Jail, and they brought them out, and they do this tactic where they charge somebody with 20 counts of basically the person commits one crime, but they think of 20 different counts of that crime that they can attach to his charges, and they scare the crap out of him. You could do 25 years if you don't at least admit to this one crime, and they call it a plea deal. And it's a tactic that the government uses, the criminal justice system uses, to almost create, in fact, they have created sort of like a, what's it called in a slaughterhouse where the cows, because that's what it's like. You watch these criminals come out and it's guilty, 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 guilty. And they all get their plea deal, and they all get, the deal they made with almost no one you'll see if you sit in court and in any major city and you watch people that have been charged with significant or any charges. Almost ever see you almost never see anybody say, no, I'm not guilty and I'm going to fight this.
almost
And
an
it's,
assembly line of people coming out, right?
yeah, it's like a factory. It's that they're just sending people away, or getting their way by using that tactic. And I think that's abused in a big way by our criminal justice system. I know that's the experience that I had when I was charged with marijuana sales. It wasn't only marijuana sales, but it was marijuana sales to an undercover officer, and there was like a few more counts that they tacked on top of that, and said, hey, if you fight this, Mr. 18-year-old, you could be seeing 25 years in jail. But if you plead to this deal that we'll give you 3 years of probation, and you watch your ass, don't get in trouble again. Even though I broke no law at the time, all I did was give a guy some pot after we legalized pot, which wasn't illegal. But I still pled, and I think a lot of people do that, and it's a shame. I think I think it should be illegal to compound. It should be illegal for the criminal justice system to compound the charges for what amounts to one crime.
Did you have a
And they do
public
it all the time.
defender that could help you with that decision, or were you taken out like in front of the judge? And
I actually had a pretty good lawyer from the. I was working for a man named Jack Harrer, who wrote "The Emperor Wears No Clothes: The Hemp and the Marijuana Conspiracy." He was a great man. He was a pretty hardcore army guy, Republican in early years in like the 1950s, but then he smoked pot when he was in the 60s and the early 60s, and he went from like straight shooter, I'll never touch that stuff, to what the heck is wrong with this? I'm going to work the rest of my life to try to legalize this stuff. And he set me up with a lawyer who basically was talking to me through the glass and said, what do you want to do with your life? And I told him, acting and be an artist and director, etc. And he said, just plead to the charge. This is not going to stop you from getting a job in your field.
Like if you wanted to be a school teacher, maybe you should fight it because felony and working with children, but an actor, you're fine.
Yeah, and it wasn't until 30 years later or something that I finally did get that felony expunged when the laws changed completely across this whole nation, etc. I now legally have, I'm clean Gene Okerlund. I have nothing on my record at the moment, thank goodness. Except for bad breath in the morning.
I might be guilty of that. Excuse
me. Okay, another horrible thing that I witnessed in the criminal justice system personally. A woman hit me in the back of my car and smashed my car and effed up my back real good, and then took me on a high-speed chase around LA. And I sued her for the back injuries. And I used to work out. I used to get cut up for movies or film to stay in shape and be able to audition for those parts, or just be able to exercise and get bulked up for particular roles. And she hurt my discs in my back so badly that now it's very difficult for me to work out like I used to work out without throwing that disc. And it's difficult. And it was about 4 years of intense care and what do they call it? They made me do so much of it.
Physical therapy, probably.
Physical therapy and shots in the back and shots in the discs, etc. It was a really odd thing because the first time that I sued this drunk driver that hit me and took us on this high-speed chase and risked all these people's lives and changed my life forever, I got a $1.8 million judgment. And I was thrilled because I felt like that was fair. She had taken away my ability to possibly, work in big things for the rest of my life. I wasn't going to be able to get that muscle on again. And I had $100,000 in doctor's bills and etc. And somehow, after I got the judgment, she had really, 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 really rich parents. And she hired these incredibly good, incredibly expensive lawyers who were able to get a retrial of the judgment And during that retrial, I had, this is a weird thing too with the new criminal justice system and social media. They were able to use a video of me, which was basically how they the I got my judgment taken away. It turned from 1.8 million to 48,000. And they showed a video of me 2 years after the accident on social media. I had a 5-pound leaf blower in my hand at my mom's house. And I rotated my wrist so that the leaf blower blew up at a tree above me and the leaves all fell. And it was just a little joke video that I was doing. And they brought my girlfriend up on the stand and they said, look at him lifting that leaf blower up above his head. How do you explain that if he can't lift 15 pounds with his left hand? Because the leaf blower was in my left hand. And my girlfriend at the time was dealing with a lot of PTSD and heavy stuff on her own. So she was very nervous on the stand. And she said, well, he only did it once, which didn't sound great. And really, we had seen this video. I had watched it on my social media, and I went, I bet you they're going to use this, and they're going to try to say that I'm like Mr. Buff holding a leaf blower. But it wasn't one of those ones that you put on your back. It was just one of those little leaf blowers that look heavy but aren't heavy. And I even called my mother and I said, hey, Mom, how much does this leaf blower weigh? Just in case they ask this question while I'm on the stand. I prepared for it, but my girlfriend didn't. And it was only a 5-pound leaf blower. But that video, because when I rotated my wrist, the leaf blower went above my head, they were able to say, look at him lift that above his head.
Right.
Yeah. And I think it's pretty incredible how they can use social media and anything that you put on social media against you, like criminally these days. Because I've always thought of the internet as a place where you can not necessarily be yourself. Like you can have fun, you can be a little bit of a personality. It's not a, I've always thought of the internet as a place that's not real. And it's becoming more and more a place that they consider like very, very real. And whatever you say, do, or whatever you do here, you can be held accountable for, even in court. So
I feel like Cassie has something to say.
Yeah.
We have a guest, and we have a few topics we haven't got to. I believe we have to speak about Pride because it's Pride Month, and UFOs and dick jokes. But
dick jokes. Always dick jokes.
I have Davey here from Twitter.
Yo,
and
Davey,
I'm going
how
to
are
add
you,
him.
What's going on? How you doing, guys?
Good. How are you?
You're a
Good.
little.
All right, man. Just figured I'd check how it's going, and I got the link here, so I figured why not give it a go.
Right on. So what do you have to say about the criminal justice system in America?
Well, I mean, in Canada, or because that's where I'm from. In Canada, I mean, I just stay out of it. It's pretty much the same as our neighbors up north with you guys. So, you know, I just I try and keep my hat on and just basically be a good dude. You know, you don't want to end up in the criminal justice system. I know that. You know, especially for minor stuff because it happens all the time. You know.
Yeah. Me and Cassie the other day we're talking about. He's an agorist, so our producer is an agorist, and he doesn't believe in a police force, and I don't like the police force much. I think there are great officers out there. I think people that work in missing persons and homicide cops and people like that are there are some great people doing their jobs as police officers. But for the most part, what's funny about the system now is the dummies and the worst police tend to get the patrol car jobs, what I call the sharks, the guys that are out there fishing around looking for people to pull over and bust and try to get people. And that's
And
their
the bullies.
mindset.
And the bullies.
What?
So many
Yeah,
bullies grow up to be cops, and now they're bullies with a badge. Have you seen some of those police that are just overgrown bullies, and they
yeah.
enjoy that they're scaring and terrifying this person? Oh, look at the baby doggy! So cute.
Hey, what are you doing with
Here's
that
Katie.
dog in your house? We're gonna kick in your door and we're gonna tase it. Then we're gonna tase you, Dave. And if you don't respond, we're gonna shoot you and your little dog too.
Sorry about that, but I think my mic was muted. My dog was making some noise with the squeaky toy, so I had to get him.
Monty, you got kicked from the stream. You're back now.
Okay. So there's an interesting show I saw recently, and I want to tell you guys about it. It's called Body Cam. And there's a few other shows that are like Body Cam, blah, 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 Body Cam, blah, blah, blah. And I started to watch it, and it was really interesting propaganda because the first half of the season were police behaving pretty well, and they had pretty good officers. And the way the show is structured is they show the body cam and they show the crime or the person that they were, whatever they were dealing with. They show the footage from the body cam, and at the same time, they're cutting back to the officers that were involved in whatever crime that they were trying to stop. And they tell their story to the camera while you see the body cam footage. And for the first half of the season, I was watching it and I was going, wow, there are pretty good police in the world. And hey, maybe I'm a little bit, from my previous experience of being tormented by the police in my life, maybe I've judged the police system a little bit too harshly. But then by the end of season 1, they were showing appalling behavior by the police on these body cams. And by season 2, almost every episode is completely illegal behavior, illegal search and seizures, excessive use of force for no reason, all sorts of ugliness. But it's packaged like, hey, if you don't do what the police ask, you are going to get beat up and shot. And you asked for it. And the whole show really is slanted towards making you believe as an American citizen that they can do whatever they want, whenever they want, to you, however they want. And it's your fault for not complying with whatever they ask you to do. And that's really the reason that I wanted to do the show. I was so appalled by that show and what they did to some of the people in that show, and then tried to paint themselves as good police, that I was like, we got to do a show and teach people about the right to remain silent and the right to not have your car searched if they don't have probable cause, and all these things that you do have the right to not be harassed by what I call the biggest gang in America, the police force. And like I said, I want to reiterate, I'm not against all police officers. I think there's some police officers doing incredibly good work. Especially, I watched a show about missing persons, and some of these people were in missing persons in this precinct that they were following, were some of the most humble, kind, empathetic, amazing people that I'd ever seen. These officers. So it depends on what system you're working for in the police unit, but it also depends on how proficient and how smart you are. And I think a lot of times, like Tyson said earlier, I think they hire people that aren't so smart, and they end up being patrol cops or beat cops for 20 years, and they end up just hurting people and accosting people. And I think it's good for all Americans to get yourself something like this. It's just a copy of the Constitution or a copy of the Bill of Rights, and read it and know your rights. And anytime that you feel like you've been illegally searched or illegally had your house broken into or been treated unjustly by the police, know your rights, stay silent, don't say anything to them, and wait till you get a lawyer before you answer any questions. Especially if you feel like you're being uh, untreated fairly. I had a bunch of my friends over a couple days ago, and these are a lot of minority friends of mine, rappers and etc. So Mexican and African American, and their experience with the police force was much worse than mine was. Um, and they've seen the escalation of violence. Like these are like 50-year-old African American, 60-year-old African American friends of mine, and they were like, man, I remember back in the day when you can run from the police. We used to hop the fence and try to get through, get home. uh, Now, man, you run, you're asking to get shot. And I had a police officer. My my great grandfather was a police officer, and he was an officer in Chicago, and he used to always tell my dad that it was he would never shoot first ever for any reason. It was at the time in like 1950 Chicago, 1940 Chicago. Um, you, all those police were under a code of honor that the criminal had to shoot first. And I find that to just be an amazing thing, because that seems to be not at all how the police act today.
And I think the police need training and support as well. There are times when somebody is having a mental issue, and a family member or neighbor might call the police and say, hey, this person needs help. They don't need the police to come and shoot them dead. They need police to come out with maybe a counselor, talk them out of that, uh, whatever they're going through, and maybe in the worst case scenario, maybe have a trank gun, right?
Yeah.
But they don't need police going there. And of course he has a knife. Of course he's swinging around. He's having a mental issue. I didn't call
Yeah.
you here to kill him. I called you here to help him.
Yeah. I actually saw on body cam this guy that was having a mental issue, and he had a knife, and he charged, and at least 9 different officers unloaded on him.
I assume he did not survive.
No, he did not. And they tried to sell it as he rushed us with a knife. What else were we supposed to do? I don't know, maybe a taser. You've got bulletproof body armor. You're badass police officers. Maybe you're 9 against 1. He's got a kitchen knife. Maybe you don't shoot him, or at least aim at his feet. I don't know.
And it only
Something
takes
that's
one
not.
of you, not 9 of you, to unload. Yeah,
Yeah. There should
I
be
just
like a designated couple of shooters that are aiming at a part of the body that maybe you're most likely going to survive. Something that's not just 11 guys opening fire and obliterating this guy having a mental breakdown.
now don't get me wrong. There are criminals, or armed criminals. Just here in San Diego, I was reading on the news that one of our officers pulled over somebody in a stolen car, and he got out and he shot the officer in the arm. Um, and he got away. It's been 3 days, and they're still looking for the guy. Um, it is a dangerous job, and there are times when an officer should use their service weapon. But I think that they're a little too quick to pull it. They're a little too quick to use it in undeserving situations. My own opinion. Yes, it's a very dangerous job. If you're scared, don't do that job.
Yeah. I also think this is another interesting thing about policing. When somebody runs from the police and they get into a high speed chase across populated areas, why don't the police just back off? They got the plate. they're risking the lives of countless citizens. They're risking the disaster of innocent people being murdered. I don't understand why so often it becomes a high speed chase, and then we find out that, oh, the guy had a drug charge or a warrant or
a broken tail light.
a broken tail light. I
It's
think,
if the guy's wanted for murder, if this is an escapee, from one of the jails and he's dangerous. I mean, there are times where you don't break off a pursuit. I get that,
yeah.
but most of the time, it's not that big a like. The citizenry is in huge danger because his license is suspended.
Yeah. Yeah. There should be like a federal law about when you pull off a chase and when you don't. We have somebody named Katie Lotus over there that looks like she's wanted to speak for a while. Can we bring her on?
I
It's our
believe
friend Katie
they
from
should
England.
have control of their mute.
Oh, it's Katie. Hi, Katie.
Can they unmute themselves? There
Hello.
we go.
Hi. So, what do you think
Can everybody
about?
hear me okay?
Yeah, you
Yeah,
live in a
we can hear you.
country where you have CCS or whatever it's called, CCTV, and cameras are everywhere. And
Oh yeah, we can't get away from them.
yeah, so what's it like living? I mean, we live under Big Brother too. We're monitored and all that, but you get like tickets from cameras, right?
Oh yeah. We've got two types of speed cameras. There's ones that are like big yellow things that you can see from a mile away, and like GPS will pick it up, and the GPS will warn you. But then there's other ones that can be in between, and the mobile units as well that are set up by the police force. They don't show up on GPS or anything. And even if it's like 2 a.m. and there is no traffic on the road, you run a red light, there's cameras that are, I don't know if any of them are video, but I know that there's actual cameras that take about, is it 5 or 10 shots per second at every set of traffic lights on top of them. So if you run a red light, you will get a ticket for it.
I was proud of the
And
citizens of my little city of Los Angeles. They put up red light cameras all over our city, and we as a people of that city voted to get them all taken down for the most part. There's like 3 of them left. But I know in England that CCTV is, because of the imperfection in the technology, they're arresting people with the facial identification. Uh, it's not as good as identifying African Americans and minorities as it is white people, and it makes mistake.
it has got better though.
Yeah, and it makes mistakes with white people too. If you had a beard one day and then you don't have a beard the next, you can be, the computer can. So there's people that are getting arrested for terrorism and horrible crimes, and they end up not being that person. I hope that we never reach a state in America where there are literally cameras everywhere we go, besides the ones the listening devices we carry in our pocket and the computers.
No, I don't think we're going to get away from them in America or in England anytime soon because there are just too many of them. I mean, you can't wave at somebody without it getting caught on CCTV. I mean, you could be stood. There's very few blind spots. I mean, I don't know about in America, but across here in England, there's very few blind spots because of the way the cameras are angled on the streets. So
Yeah.
it picks up a lot. Although, if there's been like a B&E or somebody's being assaulted, guaranteed the camera won't pick it up. So there's just no evidence. It happens every single time, especially with, and I know that it's wrong to say this, but it is true, especially with certain minority groups. If there's like a targeted attack, and they're like, oh, well, it's all on CCTV. Oh, I'm sorry, the camera wasn't pointing that way at that exact minute, but it was 2 seconds later. It's a little bit hinky for me.
Yeah.
there's all this CCTV, and yet when it's needed the most, it's not pointing in the right direction. And it's like, oh, for God's sake, you know.
Yeah.
You know, I'm wondering with all the cameras, both here in the U.S. and especially now you're down there. Hi, Katie. In the UK,
Hi.
waving to. Uh, I'm wondering because one of our other topics was UAPs, UFOs. I'm wondering if if any of these cameras are catching uh, uh, UAPs and look at all the cameras. I mean, everybody has a Ring doorbell camera now. Everybody has a. I mean, are we going to get more photos of unidentified?
Well, just like Katie was saying, it's funny because very often when a UFO flies by, the cameras just happen not to be working.
And also, it's very rare that they point up.
Yeah.
As well. The government monitor them as well. Whether they say they do or not, I don't believe that's the case. They do monitor them. They have a live feed through all of them.
Of
And
course.
if anything like that was caught on CCTV, they'd just loop the footage onto something else and they'd go deal with it. If it's a hoax, then they may release that footage and it's the UFO hoax. But if it was something, which it probably is, let's face it's not going to be released, and it may be called just a little tiny little meteor or a bit of space junk that's like accidentally slops down from orbit. You know,
it's kind of like in America when the flight whatever 747 hit the Pentagon. The first thing the Pentagon said was, "We don't have any footage of this airplane hitting the Pentagon." The structure in America that has the most camera footage, perfectly looking at it from all sides, didn't have any footage of a 747 hitting the Pentagon. Then they finally released the footage that they said, "Oh, we found the moment the 747 hit." And if you watch the footage, you can absolutely tell that it's not a 747 hitting the Pentagon. But that's still the official story. So weird stuff. I also wanted to mention that the Bobbies in England do a great job dealing with violent people with all sorts of weapons, bats, knives, etc. And the Bobbies aren't carrying guns. So I wonder why in America we end up shooting so many people when in England the Bobbies end up de-escalating situations quite often where people have weapons that are not guns.
There's two types of police officer in England. There is what's called a PCSO, which is a police community support officer. They are not sworn in. So by law, they can only detain people for up to 30 minutes. They don't carry handcuffs. They don't have a lot of power at all. And then there's the like official police and the specials, which are actually sworn in that have full powers. No, there's three, and then there's the firearms unit. But they're only brought in under special circumstances. But I mean, my mother was in the police force and she was one of the PCSOs. And the stuff she had to deal with was ridiculous. The abuse she took, verbally and physically, was ridiculous. There was one incident where there was herself and a colleague, a female colleague as well. Neither of them had cuffs or anything. And there was a very violent man in this store, just tearing the place apart. He was high on drugs, and it was this like new drug that was going around. They actually named it Clockwork Orange because it sent people that psycho. And my mother got pushed into shelving units, like heavy displays of like beer and my mum's collie got thrown over the counter, and somehow they managed to radio through as well to get back up. And luckily, within that 30 minutes, that they were able to detain this violent person who was high on drugs.
Which we would just shoot. We'd just kill him, usually.
Well, yeah. And so the policing across here is extremely different to across in America. And the only weapons that our police officers carry, like this is taken out of the equation, the firearms unit, is a baton and the
taser or spray.
I call it the go blind spray, pepper spray.
Yeah.
And they're the only two things that they have. They don't even have tasers or anything like that.
And then in a gun-related crime, they can call the special, what in America we would call SWAT, the armed police, but only in a call that requires that. I think we should take that lesson from Europe as well. I like the idea of no more patrol officers. Just if you have a town like we're in Colorado Springs right now, a small town. It's not a big town. Maybe if we had 10 police buildings spread out every 5 miles or every 3.5 miles throughout town, where the police stayed and they were ready to respond to any emergency, you could call and the police could go respond. But the idea of patrol officers sniffing around the city and looking for people to pull over and arrest and bust people, I think is a mistake. And it's usually a lot of those officers that end up misbehaving and in all sorts of ways. The show's almost over. In fact, we're an hour show. We should have been over 13 minutes ago. But
we do have Davey up there.
Yeah, I'm going to let Davey speak again. And I don't know if Leftwich is still in the house or if he's in the house tonight. We usually end our show with Chris's divine comments on our topics.
Well, would you still want to do like a 40-minute or so space following this?
So
Chris was mentioning he'd come
There's a
into
few
that.
more things I wanted to talk about as far as the criminal justice system and the courts, but we'll leave it for another episode. I do want to let people know this was the first live episode of Dangerous Thoughts. I want to thank everybody for tuning in on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, etc. We'll be live on other channels soon. Also, the format of the show is every week we pick a different topic that we think should be discussed by citizens. We will have a guest every week. And at the end of the show, just like we did today, we'll take some callers. But if you know anybody and you're a fan of the show and you know anyone or you are someone that wants to be our guest of the week, whether you're an artist, a politician, a musician, someone that just wrote a book, someone that just made a movie, someone that wants to share anything to do with anything, write us at dangerousthoughtshow@gmail.com. Tell us who you are and why you'd like to come on the show, and we'll try to get you booked. We're live every Sunday at 6 p.m. And if you want to be a speaker on the show at the end of the show, just contact Subscript Pirate at Twitter Spaces on Twitter and DM him. Let him know you want to speak, and hopefully we can bring you up on the show. Also, when the show ends, we stay live in one place only over at Twitter Spaces at Monument. Can't even say my own name because of this microphone issue. At one place only, Twitter Spaces at Monumente Reme. And we hang out there for a while longer and discuss the topic a while longer on what we call Dangerous Thoughts Overtime. So go ahead and join us there now if you'd like. But that's the end of our live show.
Real quick.
Well, no.
We have Davey.
Let's have Davey.
I have to mute his mic when you're speaking. I apologize. I don't know if your volume is too loud or if you're watching it on another screen, Davey, but we get a little echo from you.
Okay, so let's have Davey
So-
wrap it up, and if Leftwich is around, I'd love to hear from him, and then I'll wrap it up.
And yeah, I'll definitely be over in the space. It's really, really good to see you all in person. And, well, I guess not in person, but sort of, you know, it's really starting to what we're doing now. It's pretty cool. So thanks for
He's underwater.
No, we're having troubles hearing you, but we did hear you. No, we heard you. Just sounded like you were swimming a little bit, but we heard everything you said. Thanks for coming on, Davey. And also, I like what Davey had to say. You know, there is a certain beautiful, what's the word I'm looking for? Philosophy of, like, you know, just don't be a criminal, be a good person, and try not to break the law, and try not to hurt anybody, and maybe you won't get caught up in the criminal justice system. Unfortunately, that doesn't always work in this country, and we'll talk about it more on a later show. But this was fun to do our first live show. I'm sure we'll get better at operating week to week. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks everybody for watching. Is Leftwich around?
He'll be in the space.
He'll
Twitter
be
space
in
Twitter Spaces after the chat.
live.
All right. Well, that was the first sort of test episode.
Thank you, Davey, and thank you, Katie, for
thank
joining
you,
us.
Katie, for joining us. This was fun. Don't break the law. like there's such thing as a law that you can't break. That's the other problem with the criminal justice system. There's so many laws on the books that they can pretty much come and charge you for anything whenever they want.
And no
Weird
one
things
person can know all the laws, right?
No. Like
you're expected to
loitering.
follow every single law, all million laws, but you can't know them.
I think loitering is hilarious. Like, you can't stand around in the same
stand around
place
being
for
a
too
human.
long.
Yeah, that's illegal.
It's illegal to stand around and be a human for too long. Move on. But for the good judges out there, for the good people working within the system to try to improve the system, thank you. For the bad people that make police gangs and do all sorts of corruption within the system, F y'all. Thanks for listening to Dangerous Thoughts. We'll see you next week. Join us on Overtime for another half hour or an hour or so, if we have some more people that want to chat. See you next time. Good night, everybody.